Hi, it's Jerry Roberts back. It's Friday, so it is time for Newsmakers Pandemic TV. Joining me today, Delaney Smith from The Independent, Josh Molina, noted podcaster, and Nick Welsh is on special assignment. So I just checked before we started, and there are now 168 comments on Ed Hat, Delaney, about the name change for Sambo's restaurant.
And why are you quoting Ed Hat?
Well,
There's
because
also
you
200 comments on my story that I wrote.
No, that's a lot of comments, actually. No, because you disabled the comments. You don't want to hear from the people. Anyway,
Independent disabled the comments on that.
The Indie disabled your comments long ago. Anyway, I'm using this only as a point of reference that there is interest in the story. And since you scooped Josh on it, I wondered if you could, how did this come about so suddenly? I mean, Sambo's has been Sambo since 1957.
Right.
There have been protests about it in the past, but I guess because of the march and everything Sunday, how did it come about?
Well, neither Chad or Michelle, the owners, wanted to talk, but so they spoke through John Davies, and what he told me was that at least for just this specific Santa Barbara original location, there's never been a mass protest over the name. He said there's been people who have come in and been upset about it, but there's never been so many people all at one time. And that was just enough for them that they'd rather respect their customers and stand with the Black Lives Matter movement than to try to fight it. I mean, yes, there's been huge protests. There was throughout the 60s and 70s, and then by 82, I think it was 82 anyway, all Sambo's, the over 1,000 chains nationwide were gone, besides this one left. So it does seem a little silly that this one got to keep the name this many more decades still later, but it did. But yeah, Davies said it was the protests that did it.
All right. So, Josh, as you know, originally Sambo's was the conflation of two names of the guys who started it, but it was in 1957. So I think even then it was probably a little bit of a dog whistle. But there was this weird thing going on that I didn't quite get about how there was a GoFundMe petition and somebody was trying to raise money to give them to change the name. What was behind that?
Well, it's a little unclear, Jerry, but as I understand it, a member of the community started a GoFundMe page to help the Stevens family raise money to pay for the name change and the rebranding. And it's unclear to me what kind of coordination that the person had with the Stevens family. I was led to believe there was coordination, but by the end of my reporting, I was unsure about that. The person who did it is not affiliated with Black Lives Matter.
Do you know who it is?
Yeah, I don't recall the name off the
Rochelle
top.
Monet.
What is it?
Rochelle Monet, or maybe Monette, M-O-N-E-T.
Is she a player? Is she an activist or a city hall person? Or
no, she said that she's been doing work in the background towards anti-racism work, and she's never been vocal about it. But she also is now being really vocal about the fact that she's completely separate from Black Lives Matter Santa Barbara, and she doesn't want to be affiliated, and she wants to be her own activist.
And Josh, and so they didn't want the money, as it turns out, right?
Yeah, well, she was raising money, and she got a lot of money really quickly. She got about $2,500, I think. And it was sort of analogous to what was happening on social media on Tuesday. There was sort of a media blackout that a lot of people were taking part in, and then everybody kind of bandwagoned on that. And then Black Lives Matter came out and said, we're not affiliated with this blackout. We need social media. We need these alternative platforms in order to get our message out. So why would we silence ourselves on this day? And then a lot of people pulled back. And they're very similar situations, because I think people who gave money may have thought that it was part of the Black Lives Matter coordination, and it wasn't. So what happened was the Stevens family was sort of like, we're not going to take the money. Obviously, from any perspective, it looks really bad that they're going to ask or take money from the community to pay for their rebranding. There's no real way to sort of explain that. It's their business, it's their private entity. If they're going to rebrand, they need to pay for that. They've had it that way for 50 years. That should be on them. And so they said, we're not going to take the money. And then shortly after, the individual stopped taking donations. So it was a little muddy, but that's how I understood it.
All right. Delaney, did you ever eat at the restaurant formerly known as Sambo's?
Yeah, it's been quite a few years though. And it's a tourist restaurant. It's, at least in my opinion and what I remember of it anyways, that it's overpriced, like mediocre pancakes. But it's about the tourist thing. It's about being on the water, or across the street from the water anyway. But the artwork on the inside I specifically remember it striking me as I was kind of shocked. I thought it was incredibly offensive, and I was shocked that.
Yeah, and they used to sell all these gewgaws and dolls and weird stuff. So I thought their comment was very gracious. Delivered through John Davies. Was a kind of a Trump guy, but they said, look, we don't want to do any injury to our neighbors, and so yeah, no problem. Josh, I know you ate there a bunch of times, I'm sure, but let's back up to the
Jerry, if I could just sort of stake my claim as a longtime Santa Barbaran and as a third generation Santa Barbara resident on half of my side of my family, we always sort of knew don't go to Sambo's growing up because of the connotation of the name. So it wasn't as though
it was a big secret.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a local, the deal when you go to Sambo's. You may not know the origin of the name. You may not know that it's a combination of people's names who are the owners, but you know what the word meant. You know that it was offensive, and there's plenty of other places to eat at. In Santa Barbara.
All right, well, let's back up to the rally and the march on Sunday, the Black Lives Matter rally. So, first of all, it was a very impressive crowd, 3,000 people. According to Nick's story, a lot of new people. And then there was a march over to the cop shop, and the cops were out in riot gear, and one thing led to another. You were there watching the mayor when she showed up to speak to the, or I don't know why she showed up exactly. There's sort of conflicting messages. Well, what went down exactly, Josh?
So in the middle of the intersection, the Black Lives Matter representatives and organizers asked Black people to lay down in the middle of the street for 8 minutes and 46 seconds to recognize or to do it for the amount of time that the officer had his knee on George Floyd's neck and head. They asked other people in the audience with the crowd to take a knee. So you either lay down or you took a knee. And so that happened, and that was very powerful. It was when you have to just be silent for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, you realize how long that is. And so after that, the protesters sort of very peacefully, gently broke the police tape. It wasn't any effort to rush anything. It was just, hey, symbolically, we're going to just kind of move a little bit more toward the police officers.
So that was the corner. That's the corner of what, East Figueroa and Santa Barbara Street?
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. And so there was just a lot of talking. There was, megaphone and, a lot of loud voices. And then from my perspective, Anthony Wagner, who's the new PIO for City Hall, and Kathy Murillo, the mayor of Santa Barbara, they were kind of off to the side, but very, very close to the police officers. And they kind of creeped a little bit closer and closer to the organizers. And Kathy sort of just kind of walked in, and she sort of stood there and was waiting for her opportunity to say something. And it looked really uncomfortable because the organizers, this was their moment. They did something pretty powerful, and they were talking. And Kathy just sort of stood there, and then there was sort of this confrontation, not confrontation, but Crystal Farmer looked at her, and they sort of had words. And Kathy wanted to talk, and they wouldn't really let her talk. And Kathy kind of got ruffled a little bit, and there was this exchange back and forth. And the crowd started to yell, "Take a knee." Kathy was like oblivious to it. She didn't act like she heard it. And so there was this exchange, and Kathy at one point, took off her mask because Crystal Farmer told her, silence, stop talking, words to that effect. And Kathy said, hey, when I'm talking, you need to be silent too, or something like that. And it was just really, I can tell you, it was extraordinarily it was just unbelievable that the mayor of Santa Barbara would interact with these organizers in that way on two levels. One is just politically, like, read the room. No, this is not your spot. This is not your time. This is not your place. You're the mayor. You have a platform every day, 7 days a week, all forms. You don't need to interject yourself into this moment. It's not your time. It's not your period. And then two, once you try and you realize you're not welcome, turn around, go back. And I don't know what the problem would have been for her to take a knee. I think that it would have gone a long way for her to do that.
What she ended up doing at the council meeting on Tuesday, anyway, on the virtual council meeting. What was your takeaway from the whole exchange? I mean, Delaney, one of the women said something, and I don't know if this is exact quote, but she said, you're passing as white or something too.
Simone told Kathy she's a white passing woman, which means that, yes, Kathy's a Latina, but she can easily pass as a white person. And I think that when Kathy took it as offense, I wasn't directly right up there where Josh was, just to be clear, but I did see the video of this exchange, and there was a lot of head bobbing right when that term got thrown out there. Kathy did and it got really like, I don't know how to quite describe it. I can just say I was shocked that was the mayor engaging in that way. But she got really offended by that. I don't think it's meant to be offensive. The point is that Kathy doesn't share the same experiences that they share. Kathy can go into many situations and not be judged by the color of her skin the way that they are. And that was the point they were trying to get across. And Kathy did not take that well. But yes, Simone called her a white passing woman and said, as a white passing woman, do not silence my Black sister. I can pretty much say verbatim, that's what Simone said. I did talk to Crystal later in the evening after the protest was over, and asked her what her take was in the aftermath of that. And she said, to be honest, it was less about this whole feather ruffling BS that was going on for her. What she was the most upset about was that Kathy didn't kneel, because what message is that sending, really? I mean, she could have kneeled. It would have been simple. It's not like other mayors in cities all over the United States aren't doing the same exact thing. And so that was her biggest takeaway, was that action right there and refusing to kneel signaled to her that Kathy wasn't on their side. So that was her problem. It wasn't any of the other BS.
Yeah, and I mean, you can kind of understand, given Kathy's career and her work with young women of color, particularly, how she might take offense at that. But the other thing that seemed to be upsetting was the fact that the cops, I don't know what, 24 cops were out there in riot gear.
Anthony Wagner wouldn't want it to be called riot gear, but I mean, it looked like riot gear. They had shields and they made a whole wall of bodies. So yeah.
And then when the chief was questioned about it, Chief Lori Luna on Monday, she said she wasn't there. She wasn't in town or so. Who gave the order for them to do that? It seemed a little provocative on the part of the police.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on at City Hall, but they just moved Anthony Wagner to help with PR, and it seems as though they need to hire someone else to do crisis communication. They spend a lot of money on consultants. They seem to be tripping over themselves in every possible way in the last 3 weeks, and obviously with the protest and the rally, they really sort of made some big mistakes. Lori Luna at the City Hall, at the City Council meeting, she was unclear. She said, I was coming back to Santa Barbara. My command staff was in charge. So as somebody who writes and studies words and communicates, that to me is very unclear. And it sounds like
She's sort of half throwing somebody under the bus, but
it
not
sounds
really.
like passive voice, and you're trying to avoid accountability in your statement one way or the other. So I was headed to Santa Barbara, but I wasn't in charge. Very weird, as opposed to I ordered this or I did this. The thing is
Well,
that
why not just I take responsibility. I'm the chief.
yeah, I mean that's what leaders do. The other thing is that there's a lot of yelling, a lot of shouting, but at the end of the day, the protest was peaceful. Now, obviously, the police officers need to staff and watch these events, but it would seem, at least visually and visibly, that it was an overreaction. And why were they guarding the police station? Okay, so if they're concerned about property damage throughout the city, where were they elsewhere? They're basically, there's an assumption, and this goes to the larger issue of implicit bias. We're assuming you're going to destroy the police department. We're assuming you're going to do damage, and that's an implicit bias. I don't think they guarded the police station during any number of the women's rallies or the women's marches or any of these other events. Now, of course, it's a little bit of different context because we are seeing this stuff nationally, but not really. I think that's the thing. And then Anthony allowing Kathy Murillo to walk into this scenario, if that's my PR person or if I'm the PR person for that person, I mean, that's a colossal mistake.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that happened was then, of course, Kathy sat and absorbed 2.5 hours of negative comments on Monday at the Zoom meeting, people following up on the rally. And then Delaney, it just seemed like the city council just kind of accepted all of the demands, at least in principle. I know it's going to be back on the agenda that Black Lives Matter had made, including, and this is what sort of popped out to me, a civilian review board, which,
Right.
in a lot of different contexts historically has been extremely controversial, but no one seemed to give it a second thought. What was your takeaway on that?
Same. I thought immediately when hearing the demands that was going to be the one that there might be some pushback on, and it kind of made me a little bit nervous of, where do we go from here? But I think in this time period, it is kind of parallel to what just happened with Sambo's, because that Sambo's would not have changed their name if it wasn't. I think my lead of my story was it literally took thousands of protests. So I think we're in a time right now where changes are going to be made, and changes that even 1 year ago would have been laughed at and just scoffed at. I think people are getting uncomfortable, and they're just going to kind of lay down and do it. And it's a good thing. We should have it. It's honestly, it's insanity that we don't. Internal reviews of officers.
Well, the question, I think the question is what authority, well, who comprises this board? Are they just going to move the existing fire and police commissioner, which really doesn't have any power or to do anything, and say, well, that's the civilian review board? And then what authority do they have? Do they have independent investigative authority? Do they have subpoena power? Are they an appeals board where, someone who doesn't like what there's a lot of questions.
There's a lot that needs to be worked out. I don't think I'm not trying to use these cliches that everyone in Santa Barbara uses, but we don't have to reinvent the wheel on this. There's already really successful civilian committees that exist that in other cities that we can kind of mirror, or at least take some examples from to kind of guide us. And I do think that I can't imagine anyone on that council would be opposed to it in this time, because if you are, you're kind of hopefully they're doing it for the right reasons, but even if they're doing it for the wrong reasons is it's going to kill your career to speak out against this right now in this point in history. You kind of need to go, okay, it's time, before you're done.
All right, just, and Josh, now just three quick questions on the political takeaway of this. One, does this have any lasting effect on Kathy's chances for reelection? Two, did you find that Megan Harmon was kind of more welcoming of the Black Lives Matter demands than anyone? And three, what did you make of Oscar's comments, which were kind of counterintuitive, or not counterintuitive, but we're unlike others?
Okay, you're expecting me to remember three questions, so remind me after one.
Kathy, Megan, Oscar.
Okay, Kathy was probably facing an uphill battle with re-election before this because of the outrage in the business community. I think with this, she's going to have to do something extraordinarily dramatic in order to build her chances of re-election. The Democratic Party, which is hugely supportive of her, has been invisible, as far as I can tell, in terms of taking a stand on any of this, either in support of Black Lives Matter or defending Kathy, or what they should be doing, which is trying to build a bridge between the two sides. So I think she's in trouble, certainly, unless she figures out a way to embrace this.
So she was in trouble from the right, and now she's in trouble from the left, and so she's kind of getting squeezed. What about, real quick, because I want to get to some other stuff, Megan and Oscar?
Megan was pretty powerful in her comments. She sort of hit all of the points really well, in that I could go on and on about how this affects me, but it's not my time or my opportunity or my platform. I need to do what I can to amplify your voices. So from a political perspective, she was right on. She's sort of perfect in terms of how she addressed that. And I think she's probably authentic. She's younger, and I think she gets it, and she's more in tune with that sort of perspective in general. As far as Oscar, Oscar sort of used it as a platform to talk about how he's discriminated against on the council. He had said that he had this line about how he wishes other people would have supported him even on this panel in the past, and now he appreciates that everybody wants to be inclusive of people in color, but where were they before? And then he said,
who was he addressing his comments to? Was he addressing his comments to his colleagues or to the people who were testifying?
Well, I think he's probably addressing it to both. There's people on the council who probably don't include him as much as he would like in their plans and their conversations. There are certainly some city administrators who do not as well. And I think he feels sort of left out. He said that he appreciates people jumping on and off this bandwagon, but he's on the bandwagon every day and he can't jump off. Nobody said anything, but again, this is a time where you sort of have to just kind of turn your focus on the Black Lives Matters and the organizers and listen to them. It's not a time to take that and hijack it and talk about your issues. It's just not appropriate. So I think he was a little bit off in his tone. His issues are probably real, and he probably feels that way, but he probably needs to take the time outside of the Black Lives Matter moment to talk about that, not interject it in here.
All right. So Delaney, meanwhile, I understand there's a pandemic going on. And, the number of cases is still increasing in Santa Barbara County, notably in North County. And I had Tyler yesterday, and he was talking about, the theory that that's because of folks who work at the prison maybe having community spread. But be that as it may, what was your sense of how the march and the rally were conducted in terms of the social distancing and health and safety conditions under which we've all been living? And, the notion of this being a public health crisis as well as the pandemic, and how do you sort of sort through those two things?
Okay, well, I will I think I'm just going to start riffing off of what was discussed at the supervisors meeting on Tuesday, because they had a COVID hearing and they updated us. And what was really odd to me actually during that whole COVID hearing was that the only mention of the protests was one time when Dr. Von de Reynoso mentioned that I think she said verbatim that her department is wondering the effect of the large gatherings of late. Very generic and vague, but what's odd is that they're very focused on Memorial Day weekend 2 weeks ago and how that's going to affect us going to stage 3. So I do believe that how this all fits in together is as supportive as I am of these protests. They're going to keep coming. I'm covering one on this coming Sunday again. There's another one on Saturday, but it's not put on by the BLM people. But it's going to be a lot of protests in our streets. It's not going to die down anytime soon. And I think in about the next 7 to 14 days, we're going to start seeing higher increases in cases and hospitalizations. And as soon as that happens, we're going to start going backwards. And I think that people right now are kind of forgetting that we're in a pandemic. It's almost, I honestly forget it half the time until I have to walk into a business and put my mask on because it's so lax again. It's gonna come back in our faces. I can't, it's coming back in our faces. And where we're at right now is the only way we can keep moving forward through reopening our economy is if we remain stable. And we're just starting to see that peak from Memorial Day. And now with these protests, it's gonna peak more and more and more and more. So where it all fits in, it doesn't quite yet, and no one's quite thinking about it yet, but just wait a week and a half and it's gonna be all anyone can think about. That's my prediction.
You're a veteran political reporter, so you always know in a public situation how to position yourself so you get in the camera shot and make it onto the news. And I know you were up close. You were up close Sunday, but I saw you were wearing not only a white shirt but also a mask. What was your sense from inside the march about how careful people were being?
I mean, I think 99.9% of people were wearing masks. It was pretty impressive. Everyone was wearing a mask. Now, not everybody was 6 feet apart, but it's hard to be 6 feet apart in a rally in a march. But I was impressed. I mean, they did advertise wear a mask, so everybody did, and everybody took it seriously. So, yeah. I mean, if you look at the photos, everybody is wearing a mask, more so than if you walk down State Street right now.
Would you say, Delaney?
Yes, but Josh, like everyone was wearing a mask, myself included. I was in the middle of that crowd. I can also say that how many random strangers touched me in that event? So many. Like there's just like, it was like this, you couldn't get through. And the point is, in the health department kind of stopped banging this drum too in their messages, but masks don't protect you from COVID. It helps a little bit, but the whole point has been that one of the big controversies over masks has been that people feel so safe when they wear masks that they don't maintain social distancing, and that's why COVID actually can spread a little bit faster. Like in 90% of the masks I saw out there also were, myself included, was a cloth mask, which really, like, the science shows that does hardly almost anything at all. So it is a little bit concerning to see where we're going to go, because if our cases, not our cases increase, but really if our hospitalizations increase, we do have to go backwards, and we do have to start putting more ordinances in place to start going backwards in time towards stage 2. Whereas right now we already have opened 2 different sectors in stage 3. So we're in a weird teetering spot right now where we could go into stage 3, or just one wrong thing could send us back.
All right, 2 quick things, one for each of you before we close. So Josh, this was the week the Community Development Department really got hammered too. There was a grand jury report, and sort of a light version of this so-called work audit came out. Where does that stand? How long does George Buell have?
I don't know how long he has, but we have all these reports now, with the civil grand jury report being the most powerful one, saying that there's a lack of leadership. And so it's all on the table. It's no longer just a few business people grumbling. It's right at the front of what everybody's talking about at City Hall. So I think that the sort of political background of this is that the council, several of them are tired of hearing about this dysfunction, and they're going to push for a change. And whether that change is for Paul or whether that change is for Paul Casey, the city administrator, to take action with George Buell. But something's going to give, probably. Kristen Sneddon did this meeting with the business people, and she basically said that we're laying the groundwork here. We're creating performance measurements. We're going to measure them. We're going to judge them. Of course, the business people said, you already have everything you need. So something is going to give very soon. There's probably at least 3 members of the city council ready to take action.
Kristen and who else? Kristen and Oscar?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go there, but I think that there's at least 3, and there's probably, it's not hard to get from 3 to 4 in a crisis situation like this.
All right. And then Delaney, there's sort of this bittersweet thing with all the high school kids graduating this week and not being able to have their graduation ceremonies and walk and stuff. But it seems like people tried to make the best of it.
Oh yeah, no, they really did. The energy there, these kids were really proud of themselves. They were really excited. I mean, it is a bummer, but at the end, it was really representative of this class, because this class did go through the Thomas Fire and the mudslides and all the evacuate. Like, it's just like every year there's just been some shit, and there's been some major tragedies at all 3 of the public high schools, not the 2 alternative schools that I know of, but there's been a lot, and they got through all of that and got through COVID, and they somehow made it through, even if it was in a car. But they made it.
Now all the colleges they wanted to go to are closed also, which is
I know. It is bittersweet, but honestly, the graduates the energy was fantastic. They were really excited, and this is really it really is a historic moment. There's never going to be a graduation like this again in history.
Let's hope. All right. Well, that's a good note to leave on. All right, Josh, thanks. Delaney, thanks. Josh, who you got on the podcast this week?
Well, I did a podcast with James Joyce, who is the founder of Coffee with the Black Guy, and we've known each other a long time. And he sort of talks about all the issues going on nationally as well as locally with the protests. He's very well respected, and he was talking about these issues for a couple of years. Conversations about race, and now he's in super high demand because everybody's wanting to learn more. So he's sort of the highlight of this week's.
All right, and where do you find the podcast again?
So my podcasts are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, and my website, santabarbaratalks.com.
All right, plenty of free parking. Delaney, you got anything you want to plug or sell?
No, I'm good.
All right. Thanks, both of you. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Thank you, Jerry.
Still recording.